Welcome to the Chant, everybody. This week I'm talking to my ex-roommate Nathan McClallen. Nathan is a state championship basketball coach. He coaches girls basketball at the high school level and has been a coach for I think about 10 years now at various different places for various different sports. He's built up programs and is really great at it. It's something he's good at, something he's passionate about, and I talked to him about it. And we dig in. It gets a little technical. He talks about his process, what he thinks his strengths and weaknesses are. It's really interesting to just see how he thinks about building a program and how to kind of grow a team and grow a culture, because that's what a lot of it is about in high school sports, is growing a culture that teaches people and develops them, and then hopefully at the varsity level wins championships. So it's great talk. I think you'll get a lot out of it. It does get technical at times and pretty specific to high school girls basketball, but there's a lesson in there somewhere, and I do think it is an interesting talk that we have. As always, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps out, helps in us make more content that hopefully you enjoy. Obviously, you're going to enjoy an interview with a girls high school basketball coach. How could you not? So anyways, I'll stop talking, and here's my interview with Nathan. Thank you.
I'll allow you to call me cold and calculating.
I called myself cold and calculating too.
Yeah, but I just want, for the record, I think at my deepest level, I'm a softie.
I think you are too.
Yeah.
This isn't to say you are cold and calculating as like your personality.
Yeah, well, I have the ability.
Right, exactly.
And economics brings that side out of us.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. And I think that like there's just a lot of like detachment in economics. Like it's a very much like, well, let me analyze the problem, and then there you go. And it's like, well, what, like we don't prescribe enough. Like I'm very annoyed at like these are just tools we use, and just kind of taking that kind of zoomed out approach and not being in the fray, if you will, and doing
Right.
that. So like when you say that, your first response is like, well, there's a lot of different ways to do it and it's tricky. I agree. I want to know your way. I want to know your, like, I don't know if economics makes it enough, and it's because we've kind of been drilled out of us, like judgment calls, like this is bad. Like,
Right.
There's not enough. This is good. This is bad. Which, again, like I remember, like we talk about, was it positive versus normative, right? That's kind of right in there. It's like, the world needs more than just umpires. It needs players.
Yeah, although I agree and disagree, because we've had conversations about whether economics is like amoral.
Yeah.
And I think we always concluded that it had to be. But that being said, I think that what economics does is tries to analyze something outside of economics would say that religion and morality itself is just like a cost and benefit in the bigger equation.
Yeah.
And so you have to factor that in when you're analyzing it. But I do agree that at some level you have to tell people what you think is right and wrong. You can't just pretend like you're standing off to the side and it's not your role to label it as good or bad.
Right. Okay. I also think this is, like I would say, a large portion of economists are Marxists, I would say, or like influenced by Marxist thought. And it annoys me that you have like Marxist economists who have no problem like prescribing.
Yeah.
Or they'll couch it, right? They'll say, well, this is exploitation, right? The colonies are being exploited for the benefit of the mainland. I think that's Asimoglu talks about that. And it's just kind of like, that's a judgment call. You just made up a straight judgment call. You didn't say like benefited, or these were the net benefits, or like cost benefit. You said exploited. Exploited carries with it like justice, right? There's a justice claim in that. And I think it's crazy to me that like there's a portion of economists, the Marxist ones, who just get away with it.
Well, yeah, I think you see that pattern in pretty much every disagreement, where if one side is willing to basically corrupt, whether it's media or politics or education or whatever, if they're willing to teach something as doctrine and pretend like it's unbiased, then the other side almost has no choice but to do the same thing, and that's how you kind of escalate that.
Yeah, but I haven't seen the other side do that in economics. Have you?
No, and I would consider myself to be the other side, and I'm definitely moving that way. And
yeah, there we go. Good.
Part of it is experience with teaching economics, and I've taught long enough that I've seen students grow up and totally lose the principles that I try to teach them, and my conclusion has been like, I don't think I was clear enough about what was right and wrong with these things. So I need to be more clear, and I need to take more of a side. And I think my ideal, by the way, we're talking a lot about economics on this coaching podcast, but my ideal, what I want to believe is that when you present people with the right information and then draw the right conclusions, like logical, reasonable conclusions. But I think that our education system has failed so thoroughly for so long that is no longer true.
Interesting. So I agree with you. I think it's more intuitive to people, like not intuitive. It's more a part of humanity that we're just not very good with logic and reason. Like we can there's a lot of, I'm sure you hear this, like people make the choice first and they use logic and reason afterwards to justify it. I think I've come around to that, and so that's why I think moralizing is just the better way to communicate things. If you can get a gut reaction to some principle, like right now I'm writing something about how I think inflation is evil. It's not just bad, it's evil. Or not just, it's not a tool, it is sinful, it is theft, it is robbery, it is
malinvestment.
Malinvestment. I'm not even getting into malinvestment. I don't even care. I want people, it is, don't get me wrong, but the case I want to make is that it is straight up theft from the masses to the elites over time. Yeah. And I think if you can make that, like, you can just be like, this is a thing that happens, or you can say, no, it is wrong, and it is truly exploitive of the majority of people, of grandma. I think that sends a message much harder than, well, this is a thing that can happen, and economists say you need 1 or 2% inflation because it helps, and all that jazz.
It's a trick. It's all a trick. It's all seen and unseen, right? This is the single biggest thing.
So that's the thing. It's seen and unseen, but like that's the neutral way to say it. You could also say it's a mark and getting taken by a carny. Like that's the other thing. Like the seen is inflation, the unseen is the robbery. Like it's, to me, it's, the language could use some emotionalizing, some moralizing, I guess. And I think that lands home harder than just like, see, it just makes sense if you think about it rationally.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And me being skeptical of macro level calculation and numbers, like I am not just skeptical. Well, I'm beyond skeptical of inflation. I think it's bad. That being said, that's a big reason why I have chosen investment properties as one of my main, long run.
Yeah.
So if you end inflation, that's going to be bad for me personally. So I'll have to work through that.
I was about to say the only way inflation's good is just like if you're in debt.
If you're in debt,
and you have assets. Good. Yeah.
That's you should have that
good and removes savings.
Yeah.
Right? Disincentivizes savings.
Disincentivizes savings. I forgot where I was going with that, but yeah, I'm with you on that. But I'll take it a step further in that I don't think that they are actually in control as much as they think they are, or that they can measure it as much as they claim to be able to measure it. And the fact that it's always, it's in the past. It's like, yeah, we can measure it once it's over. It's like that helps with absolutely nothing.
That's like steering a boat and telling you where you were, a minute ago. Like that's not helpful at all.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you there. The measurements are like the CPI it's all a mess. And like, I don't know. I feel like I feel inflation right now. Do you think do you feel the inflation?
It's really hard to say.
Yeah. I mean, it's a impossible, unfair question, but I don't care. I feel like I'm feeling inflation. I feel like things are more expensive than they used to be, for
I
sure.
went down to Austin to get a coffee this morning, and a mocha was $5.70.
Yeah,
I feel like that's more than it used to be.
sure.
I think places like that, um, places like coffee shops or restaurants probably are operating on pretty thin or
Yeah.
negative margins, especially when there was limited capacity. And so that's tricky territory. So it's hard for me to tell if that's like them trying to raise it up a little bit to survive, or
Right.
if they're
Yeah. My barometer is like fast food. Like
Mhm.
like Subway is more expensive now than it has been in a long time. The
Yeah.
$5 foot long is dead. All right, you can't. It's not happening. It's like $5 6 inch. It's like $1 an inch now.
It was never
And
a foot long in the first place.
well, but they could at least pass it off.
Maybe once they got called out for the whole like this is only 11 inches thing, they probably
Yeah.
had to raise prices to keep their profit margin.
Maybe, I don't know. But there's also like, is there a dollar menu anymore at McDonald's? I think they have a value menu now.
Good question. I don't know. I'm sure Taco Bell still has a dollar menu.
Well,
though.
Taco, yeah, their margins are ridiculous. They can survive it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I think there's a little. I think I wish I had bought a house last year. That's where I'm at with it.
Yeah. Oh man, Austin area is absolutely insane. Before we get away from fast food, though, did you see there was a player, a college basketball player? I was trying to do some research to get ready for my tournament bracket this week, but there's this player who's number 44, and someone asked him why he was number 44, and he said, I decided because of the Wendy's 4 for $4 menu.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah.
So you're putting money on him in your bracket then?
Yeah, I think I will. I'm also steering.
You're scared?
Steering.
Oh.
The conversation back to sports.
Why? Stop. This is my show. I can do what I want with it. All right. I can edit. I will edit this if I want. All right.
Shoot. Yeah. Okay. You're right. You do win. All right. I'll stop.
All right. The control you think you have, you don't have. All right. At the end of the day,
I'm just saying. I know you already have done podcasts with economists, and I'm just trying to carve out my own lane here. I can talk. We can talk economics.
Dude, this is I plan to go an hour and a half. All right. The first 10 minutes can be about economics. Like, I don't. We got the time. All right.
I don't think you understand how much I have to say about coaching.
Really?
Yeah, I feel like this extended stall is more of kind of an
extended stall. See, now I don't want to talk about it despite you.
It's like it's a vote of no confidence from you. Like, McClallen says he loves coaching, but there's no way he can actually go for an hour just talking about coaching. So I got to fill in. I got to give some cushion here.
No, it's more just I have this on my mind. I need to get it off my chest.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, one thing about inflation.
Sure.
When you ask me if I feel it or not, one thing that I've noticed, it's really difficult. So as economists, we're taught, if you see a $100 bill on the ground, don't even bother picking it up, because if it was real, someone would have picked it up already.
Sure.
Have you heard this joke? Okay, so
I haven't. Keep going though.
So there's this idea in economics of like, okay, well, the market accounts for any profit margin. So if you think you've seen profit, just give up because it's too late.
Right. That's efficient market hypothesis.
Yeah, efficient market hypothesis, right? So,
which I don't believe in, but continue. Yes.
Yeah. So I have been hearing about inflation, reading about inflation. People like you, maybe us having conversations about inflation. And so in my head, like, it's obvious and clear. Mm-hmm. And I think that might be, one of the many variables that's driving such a huge investment in single family homes and driving prices up, because people are all saying interest rates are low, inflation is going to be high. So this is something to do. But I'm also very aware that, like, that's in my little bubble, which is, I don't want to brag, but like ahead of the mainstream curve, right? So, so it's hard to tell where the market is at, because I know that, like, what I'm hearing and discussing is not the market.
Right.
It's kind of like the GameStop thing was a really good example of that, because I was paying attention to the GameStop, and when I say the GameStop thing, I don't know if we need to clarify. People are
The
watching this
stonks,
like 10 years later, you know, like.
There'll be a Wikipedia page about it. It's fine.
Okay, you'll put it in the show notes.
I'll put it in the show notes. Yeah, nice. It's in the show notes. GameStop, one of our sponsors, by the way. So.
So I actually talked about that in economics like 2 days before it actually even exploded and went mainstream. And that was really.
You're talking about like short selling and how you.
Yeah, like I said, there's things happening. There's rumors. There's rumblings. There's this. There's that. And we talked about it. And then 2 days later was when it really took off. And the funny thing was that we do this, you know, the Market Watch free investment game. Yeah. Well, we were doing that, and because I had mentioned in class, 2 kids had bought GameStop stock.
Oh yeah.
And they had $2 million. This is the game where you start with 100,000.
Yeah.
And across the school year, the most I've ever seen anyone get to was maybe like 221 in terms of returns.
So like a doubling generally.
Yeah, basically doubling. These kids turned their 100,000 into over 2 million.
So 20 times? Is that what that is?
Yes. And well, it was actually like 2.2 million.
Right.
In 2 or 3 days. And so, we just stopped what we were doing and just talked about stocks and what was happening
at that point.
And all that. It was the most insane thing I've ever seen. And then they both held on to it and just like they were using their returns to buy more GameStop stock. And then when it went back down, they both like, it was ludicrous. I didn't even know it was possible, but they were both like negative $900,000 net worth in this game. And then it gets better. One of them held on to it and one of them sold at the bottom. And so GameStop went back up and this kid went back to the top of the charts.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
After being nearly $1 million in debt.
That's wild.
So we got to kind of like vicariously see what some people were actually experiencing.
Yeah, that's true. Now you just got to watch like Wolf of Wall Street or like, is it American Psycho? One of those. And then just like, yeah.
Yep.
There you go. So, but you're not just an economics teacher. You're also a coach.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. Look at that basketball. I don't
it's know. A magnetic, board.
Board. Yeah. For strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what that is, I would say, as someone who has observed you as your roommate, it seems to me that the coaching is your favorite part of the job. Is that something?
Some might accuse me of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm accusing you of that.
Yeah. In terms of my overall salary or what I make per year, coaching is a small percentage.
Sure.
In terms of the time and effort that I give into what I do.
Yeah.
It's a much larger proportional percentage.
Okay.
I do think I would say that it is the thing that I enjoy the most, just pure enjoyment is coaching, but I also tend to view everything I do through the lens of coaching. So I don't think of coaching as just when I have a team and we're practicing and competing, but I think that I view coaching, teaching in the classroom as coaching, and I view being an athletic director on many levels as coaching, whether it's coaching my coaches or coaching parents how to think about high school sports or whatever it is. So yeah, and coaching is coaching teams is I think that I can do more good in the world through my athletic directing, through my classroom teaching, because it's more people, bigger reach, higher leverage, and that sort of thing. Whereas a team is usually just a small group, 10 to 12, or but I really enjoy that the most, so I always want to have that. But that's also kind of my awareness or I guess perception of that is kind of what's keeping me from specializing and saying like I only want to coach. I only want to have a college coach or pro coach.
Right. You have broader reach with kind of the other things you do, but which I would say as a coach though, you have more depth, right? Like you're much more capable of affecting someone's life and steer them more. Like you just spend more time with people that way.
For sure. And you get to see them in in so many different settings, and it's, you know, something like basketball, which is my favorite sport to coach, is you're out there on a court. It's pretty vulnerable a lot of times. You know, there's lots of people watching you, and if you don't know what's happening, or you're confused or make a mistake, like that's a place where watching someone in that environment, you just get to know them a lot better, which is true. It is more of a depth thing than a breadth with thing.
Sure. Deep versus wide.
Yeah. So I'm getting both aspects, and I enjoy both.
Sure. And aren't you you're like a state championship coach, aren't you? Like here's the thing. Not only do you like coaching, you're good at it, right? The receipts are there. Like I remember when we first started them together, like, I don't know, you were coaching and you were like kind of successful. You're making like far in tournaments, but then like recently you're winning state championships now. So like, I think you're clearly either improving or you've improved the situation. You're already good and have improved the situation. So like, it's not just like I enjoy it, but you're good at it.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. Thank you for noticing that. But I would say yes, much better than I was when you were kind of seeing it firsthand. And that's through, you know, just getting reps, but also a lot of time kind of dwelling on it, obsessing over it, you know, reading and going to coaching clinics and stealing things from other coaches and just constantly being driven to improve myself. But that's actually one of the crazy things about coaching, that it's more or less the same is true with teaching, where you don't realize how many things you have to be good at until you try. And so like coaching, I remember, so like
coaching, you're saying coaching requires
so to be a good coach, right? Yeah. To be a good coach, especially let's take something like basketball.
Sure.
And so with my team, started the first year of the school, and have coached the same team for 7 years. So I've seen basically like middle schoolers who had zero experience in many or most cases with basketball, or even no experience with team sports, develop and turn into, you know, a good JV team, a decent varsity team, better varsity team, state championship varsity team. And so when I'm looking at like the skills that are needed to be a basketball coach that can do those things, it's the thing that I'm most naturally good at, that comes from me naturally, is connecting with the players.
Okay.
So I'm good at understanding who they are and what motivates them and how they can get better. I'm very good at seeing potential in someone because I understand them. So I know like they could turn into this, and we need to do this to help them. So the first thing is connection. That's what I'm naturally good at. The other thing that makes me a good coach is that I am really unreasonably competitive.
Well, that's true. So I can back that up.
Those are my two like foundation starting blocks. So just starting out from day one, if you have those two things, you're a decent coach, right? So that if I look at it year by year of the 7 years, each year has been something that I have figured out and improved, and it kind of matches the trajectory of the team. So you had to get really good at, so first you had to get people in the program. So that's, you know, making sure they're enjoying themselves, making sure they're having a good time, making sure that they understand the game, having fun playing the game. It's a very difficult game. So that's a huge hurdle.
Are you saying basketball is a very difficult game?
Basketball is a very difficult game.
The game of getting people to sign up for basketball is difficult.
So those are related, right? So especially girls basketball, especially in comparison to other things that girls would be doing, right? So it's not difficult to get guys excited about basketball. In fact, you know, that was my experience, was I just became obsessed with it, and I don't know why. And I see that with our players all the time. It's rare for girls, I think, a lot of times because they're comparing to something like volleyball, which has a much easier learning curve. And it's
throwing some shade at the volleyball crowd, huh?
No, it's just facts.
Yeah, it's not a hard sport, right?
Well, if you really want me to get into the differences, I can, but volleyball and basketball, and again, this is not throwing shade because I am an athletic director. I have to value all sports the same.
Right. All sports are equal except for basketball, which is more equal, right? Something like that. Yeah.
That's a quote from Animal Farm, right?
Yeah. It's yeah.
Okay, so here's my level of analysis with something like that.
Yeah.
Basketball and volleyball are chess and checkers. They really are.
Okay.
And I love checkers. Okay.
Sure.
So I've played checkers, within the last month.
Yeah, usually with like children.
And
yeah.
Oh, that's actually true. So that's
I know. That's the only time I played checkers. It's like, oh, you're 7. Yeah,
but in high school, I went to competitive checkers tournaments.
Okay.
Okay. Chess was there too. I did both. But so the thing is, in volleyball, you're basically in indoor. You're basically told where you need to be at all times, right?
There's a rotation,
there's punishments if you go to the wrong spot.
Oh, okay, so
that. where you go is predetermined.
Right.
Okay. Now, obviously, I've coached volleyball. Okay. I played volleyball in high school, so I don't need people in the comments being like, it's not that simple, because trust me, I understand volleyball.
Sure.
All I'm saying is, compared to basketball, where you could literally go anywhere on the court at any time, it is a much simpler, just like mental thing to grasp and understand and be confident.
I'm in my spot. I just do the.
This is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
Within. So in terms of like an economic decision making model, like.
Sure.
You don't have the paradox of choice where it's like my options are reduced to this, right? And then the same thing in volleyball is like, if the ball comes to you, you know exactly what you're going to do with it, depending on your job, right? If you're a passer, I always want to pass it with this height right here. Yeah. Whereas in basketball, if the ball comes to you, it's almost crippling the amount of things that you could do, whether it's pass, drive, shoot, pump fake, whatever.
I can attest to that. I was playing with the coronavirus being what it is. I was at home with my high school buddies, and we had a weekly basketball game as like outside a thing we could do. And I don't really play basketball. I don't really know much about it.
Yeah.
But I was like, whatever, it's an outdoor activity, I'll do it. And they passed me the ball, and I immediately went, I don't know. Pass. I just passed. I was like, I got it, and then I got rid of it because I was like, wow, there's just too much responsibility in this right here.
Yeah. And even if you do try to do something, there's like all these things that you could do wrong. It's like, okay, don't travel.
Right. Don't travel.
Don't let someone take the ball from you. Like, people are actively trying to stop you from doing the things that you want to do, and it's hard enough to do them without anyone trying to stop you.
Right. And then it's like, if I'm going to shoot the ball, please hit anything. I don't care. Just any part of the basket. And then I'm just like, well, it was a good effort,
Yeah, that was close, guys. Do I get points for being close?
Yeah. I think you do. If you're low enough level, you get points for just like hitting the rim.
Yeah.
No one can fall hit the rim. That's my belief.
And then if we're talking about reasons why basketball is hard, and especially trying to coach girls basketball, and this relates back to program building and getting people involved, but like the physicality, the sweat, the idea that you got to work out, you got to be in much better shape condition wise than a volleyball team.
Yes, basketball players are superior athletes to volleyball players. Is that what you're saying?
No,
that's what you're saying.
Maybe more well-rounded. You can specialize easier in volleyball. You can be a defensive specialist. You can be a middle blocker. But in basketball, you've got to be able to do everything: offense, defense, guard, quick.
Unless you're James Harden, right? Because he doesn't play defense.
It dates back to when we lived together. Which he's better now, but
okay. There's my basketball reference.
That's your basketball reference. Okay, so stage 1 was culture building, right? And
yes.
That's a challenge in itself, and so
is
being
that
competitive.
I want to go into more of that because I think that's really interesting. Because most time when we think of sports, we think like college or NFL, and the college a little bit is culture building. NFL is not at all, really. I mean, to some degree it is, but like there's free agency. There's people pick what schools they go to. At high school level, you don't like if you're like a sports mega school, then you draw good players. But for the most part, you're dealing with the talent you got.
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting aspect, and one that's Like, I think that's being able to like work with that, or like what's some of the lessons you've taken from that, or like is that something you've had to adjust to? Like,
Yeah, it is. It is high school level. I would say is like I look at it at the purest type of competition there is, because they have the skills, like mental and physical skills, to do the most complicated tasks and strategies, more or less. So it's not like middle school where it's just, I mean, outside of, in very advanced middle schoolers, it's more developmental, or just having fun or whatever. And then in college, we're so hyper competitive that it has evolved basically to a full-time job when you're in college.
right.
And recruiting is a huge factor in college. And then pro. And I would say all of those are team building, but and culture does matter, but it's more of we need you to buy into the team idea, rather than in high school, which in many cases, like, we need you to play the sport rather than not playing it.
Right.
And then once you're on the team, then you have all the normal hurdles of culture and selflessness and buying into the mission. So it is massive, and it's something that I struggle with because I'm aware of the stereotype of the college, or not the college, the high school coach or athletic director who's going around just openly begging people to be on the team, or like giving them grades that they want, or whatever it is like openly bartering, and I really try not to do that. But so my standard is not, if something is clearly better for me, I want to try to check myself and say, like, okay, is it also best for this person that I'm advising to be on the team? Because I'm very aware that I do have influence, and these kids do respect me, and I don't want to take advantage of that trust.
Sure. That's probably better long term too, right? Like, if you're going to be somewhere for a while, like, it's probably better to get the reputation of like having the kid's best interest versus I can get your C raised to a B- if you can just play basketball for me or something.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with like, if you're trying to convince someone to play, maybe be like, hey, you won't have to run hard at practice. I'll give you like the easy way out, or I'll let you might start trying to guarantee these things to convince somebody to be on your team, or it's the same thing with long run versus short run when you're trying to coach and build culture. Like, there might be a kid who missed practice, or maybe he was late to or he or she was late to warm-ups for the game, and so the kind of conflict there, short run, long run, is, okay, do I still start this player because I really want to win, or do I take a more long run approach and say, like, if other players notice that I'm making exceptions to the rule, then in the long run that's going to be bad for our culture and our competitiveness. So I might occasionally have to choose to do something that hurts our team's ability to win in the short run, to help build the culture and program in the long run. So yeah, it's and honestly, because I get so in my head and averse to recruiting, that I think it is a legitimate barrier to me ever becoming a college coach, because you have to, if you want to compete, and it's that same thing that we were talking about at the beginning, about how if one side is openly or blatantly kind of claiming something is objective, but it's really not, it's hard to compete against that, right? So if every other coach, I'm not saying they all are, but if the coaches are going to people's houses and talking to their families, and they're just kind of like they're marketers, right?
There's salesmen and marketers,
Yeah, so they're saying, like, this is how much you're going to play. This is what we're going to do for you. This is how we're going to, help your family, or get your brand built, or whatever. And they don't actually, in many cases, care if that comes true or not. They just want that person on their team because it's going to help them. Right. And like I said, I am a softie, but I can't sell that. I can't tell them more than I actually believe or am confident in.
Sure.
And so if I oversell something and say, I'm going to turn you into this, and then it doesn't end up being true, or I can't live up to the promise, then I'm, what am I doing? Like, that means that I'm just using the players to get what I want, and that's not what coaching should be.
I mean, that's fair. I think
Yeah,
that's unfortunate because that would be the next step in your coaching career, though, wouldn't it? It'd be moving up to the college level.
maybe, um, maybe, but I'm getting what I the level. Our team is really good, and they can do everything that I'm trying to get out of them, and whether it's skills or strategy or being good people. And so that's really awesome. And again, I said high school is the purest level. This is a pretty small school, and we totally don't have to deal with the obsessive parents or the college scholarships or the drama that comes with bigger programs because they are blinded by some achievement that
Right.
they see the coach as being an obstacle to, right?
Right.
So I'm totally happy at the high school level, and I there's some draw to matching wits or whatever against elite coaches, but I also don't really subscribe to the idea that coaches are always better as you go up, right? That's the same
Sure.
idea as being like, oh, everyone with a PhD is smarter than everyone with a master's, who is smarter than everyone with a. Right, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
There are lots of people at lots of levels, and so I don't really. I used to think that way. Like I used to in high school, I would be like, the best coaches are at pros, the next best coaches
Right.
are at
I mean,
college. But
that's the it there's a hierarchy there, so you just assume. I mean, that's how it
right,
works with players. So
right.
you just assume that's how it goes, but that's not necessarily the case.
The
There
other
are
thing
other
is,
variables.
yeah, this goes back to what I was talking about, how hard it is to be a good coach. One thing that I've learned about being an athletic director at a small school and a coach at a small school is you have little to no help, right?
Yeah.
So if you can succeed with little to no help, and take being a coach, right? Think about what I have to try to process during a game, right? Whether it's substitution patterns, how many
Right.
minutes have these people played, whether it's what defense is the other team in, what offense are we in, what adjustments should we make, what play should I call, when should I call a timeout, who is helping us on the court right now, who is hurting us on the court right now. All of those things a coach has to do. And as you go higher through the ranks, those things actually get specialized and passed off to different coaches.
That's
right?
true too.
So the way that I look at it, when you're down at this level and you're doing pretty much everything, and working the refs, forgot to mention that you have to decide when to work the refs, when not to, how to work the refs, when you choose to. At the highest levels, like most of those things are actually being passed off to someone else, and they're being specialized. And so it actually frees up the head coach to focus on whatever they want. And whenever they're like, oh, hey, how many minutes has been played around the court? Or, hey, what did they run last time they ran? So there's someone just standing there ready with that information. They don't have to juggle all of it themselves. And that's kind of something that I have seen my brain, not seen it, but I have experienced being able to simultaneously hold more things in my head year by year as I go through coaching. And that, I think, is the thrill. And that is why I love basketball so much. With football, it's actually too much, I think, for one person.
Sure.
But with basketball, you can almost, and again, I'm not saying I'm the best or on purpose, whatever, but I have seen such dramatic improvement into being able to recall, okay, last time this situation occurred, this coach ran this play, and then like anticipating it, getting my team ready, and also, just keeping all of these different variables in place. It's really like a rush to try to, it's basically, it takes just insane focus. It's actually exhausting to coach because I'm so focused on keeping all those things present and accessible the entire game. And I can't ever like let that slip or be distracted. And if you lose, it's kind of like, Have you played poker?
Yes.
If you know how to play poker well, and I don't, like, I know on a theoretical level how to play poker well, and you have to, calculate probabilities and estimate everything else, and it's kind of like that. But, and again, I'm bad at poker, but there's a point in a hand where you're trying to keep up with what everyone's doing, the pot size, what you've got, and you're trying to hold that all in your head at once.
Yeah.
And what always happens to me at some point is I lose it, and then it's just all gone. And then that hand, I can't ever recover. Like, I can't get back to where I was, and I can't make good decisions anymore. So I basically at that point just go with total gut, like maybe this, maybe that. Right. That's kind of what it's like to coach a basketball game, is because all the variables are adding up. You're trying to keep them all in front of you and focused and know what the next move is. And if you like lose focus for a second, then the whole thing comes crashing down, and you're just like, okay, what's happening? Where am I? Anyway.
Yeah. So that's interesting. And it kind of lays out this interesting thing where it's like, I feel like we often treat the coach as not a part of the team, right? You have the players and you have the coach, but the way you describe it makes it seem like the coach is a part of the team. And I think that's, there's an interesting distinction there. Like, are you the team leader, or like is the captain the team leader? Like, how do you kind of view that relationship? Like, do you view yourself as like the manager of the players, or are you kind of a player in yourself and just a different role? Like, it seems like we often just see the coach as like the guy who calls the plays and just kind of like pushes buttons, right?
Yeah.
But the way you describe it, it's more than that.
Yeah. The ideal scenario is for your coaches or for your players all to be thinking like coaches, right?
Sure.
So they're also remembering those things and also paying attention to matchups and personnel and trends, and you want your captain to be basically an assistant coach, and to be on the same page. And that's something. So, when you're talking about different sports and how much managers affect the game or how much coaches affect the game, it's really hard to pin down adjustments, and there's all these different types of coaches is what I'm talking about. To be good at all of the different types of coaches, there's players coaches who they just empower the players and make them play together. And then there's kind of like X's and O's people, and there's like hustle effort people. And then there's all these different types of coaches. And usually, or even in something like football or basketball, you might be like, this guy's a defensive coach, this guy's an offensive coach.
Right. And
so that's what I mean when I talk about it is so hard to be good at all of those things. And that's what you kind of have to be when you're coaching at this level. So to answer your question about whether I'm part of a team or not, I mean, I think the ideal is that all of your job coaching is done mostly at practice, in terms of you want them to understand why you do things and what we care about and what we're trying to accomplish. And so, but you have to have players who think like that and who want that and are capable of that. And you can really see the style that coaches have based on how teams play, because sometimes there's coaches and they're just like perfectionists and their team works like a machine, but they don't think and react for themselves. And so you see coaches who are literally coaching out loud every play of the game, right? They're yelling, whatever, what their players should do.
Like March Madness. Like March Madness is coming up. If I wanted to see a coach that would do that, can you point me to a team?
No, I don't know. I'm mainly thinking about coaches that I face at the high school level, or that I see, or that I observe. And the word is overcoaching, right? If you feel like you need to be giving your team feedback on every play they make, whether it's good or bad, then that's a way more hands-on approach than I take, because I want them to already know what they need to be doing and whether it's good or bad. And, the same thing where ideally you don't want to like pull a player after they make a mistake, especially if they know it was a mistake, to punish them, because you'd rather give them an opportunity to play through it and prove that they learned from it and that they got better.
That's a really good point. Yeah, can you go into that more? I like the idea of like if they know they made a mistake, they don't necessarily need to be punished. They just need like another rep at it or something like that.
Yeah,
that's not intuitive. Did you learn that? Like, how did you?
Oh yeah. Well, in 7 years, and again, I had played a lot of basketball when I started here, and I had coached a lot of sports, and I had watched a lot of basketball, but it was almost all guys basketball.
Sure.
I did when I was in college at Hillsdale. I was the the beat reporter for a bunch of different teams, including the girls basketball team for a couple of years, and they were really good that year. So that's like my main that was my main exposure to girls basketball before starting here, and I actually got to play against them too. So I was like the contact that they would have to when they wanted to scrimmage against guys. They would get in touch with me and basically say like, hey, bring 5 guys that are 6 foot or under and decently athletic to come scrimmage against us. And so we would do that maybe once a week or every couple of weeks. And so that's kind of my measuring stick for what good girls basketball looks like, because they were really good.
Mm-hmm.
And I would play against them, so I know like this is kind of how I measure up in terms of me as a player. And they would probably beat us a little more than half the time, I think, and we would beat them once in a while. But again, going back to answer your question, that was my only real experience with it. And when I started coaching, the first thing that I had to figure out is like girls basketball is a very different sport than guys basketball.
Oh, why?
And lots of reasons, but if I want to start, the obvious one is it's not as vertical, right? So there's less hang time, less kind of collisions off the ground, and
Okay.
it's more side to side. Another thing that's very clearly different is that guys basketball, the guys who play basketball are usually people who consume basketball in lots of formats, right? So they'll watch college basketball, they'll go to other games, they watch the NBA, right? And they know these players, they look up to them, maybe they practice on their own, maybe they, whatever it is. And girls basketball, and this took me a lot longer than it should have probably figured out, it's like they don't do any of that. So right. You can't assume they know anything about how to play or what is good or what is bad,
so it's like the built-in IQ of starting the game, of just being a big fan, just isn't there a lot of the time.
Yeah, so it's like things that I would assume, coming into a guy's team, I'd be like, everyone knows this,
right? Like what the key is. I don't. Key. Everyone's top of the key.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so a big part of teaching basketball is like teaching a language,
right?
That you have to learn before you can go forward. So those are 2 big ones. And then, the thing with physicality, if a girl has played soccer or something like that, then they adapt much more quickly. But if you've played volleyball or if you haven't played a contact sport and you start trying to play basketball, we this year, something like taking a charge is not a natural thing. And this is a weird thing to being evasive side to side or like juking someone. I feel like boys grow up playing those sorts of tag games, football games all the time, but girls don't have as much experience with that, and so they actually have to learn
like the head fake.
Yeah. Like if someone's trying to tag you and you're trying to get around them, it is not necessarily intuitive. Like that is a learned skill.
Oh.
And things like angles, if you're trying to cut someone off and you have to estimate how fast they're going, how fast you're going, and
right,
that takes practice. Right? Yeah. That's a learned skill, and it's something that again, I think boys spend more of their time doing growing up, and so you have to be more intentional about how you teach that and how you rep that. And then even like we actually had diving practice. Like I taught my team how to dive, and we drill it and we rep it because, and again, I don't know how I learned how to dive without like hurting myself or laying on my knees or whatever, but I just picked it up. Yeah, but if you just tell someone who's in high school, like, go dive for that ball, they're gonna be like, how do you do that? And because they don't know how, they're gonna hurt themselves, like land on their knee or land on their wrist or whatever, and just And of course, if you don't know how to do it, you're not gonna want to do it. But it can be done without being too painful.
Sure.
I've got more, but that's all very specific about coaching high school girls basketball.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never would have. Those are all ones I never would have guessed. Of like, yeah, but it makes sense. Like they just don't have practice with it. They don't know it that well. It's not, yeah. And also, like dudes are brought up on sports oftentimes. Like, what are you gonna do with your dad? You're gonna watch sports. Like that's just how it goes. Like it's ingrained in you. Like I don't know. That's why we have like Monday morning quarterbacks. Like that's why like I never played football in my life, but I got opinions on
that's another
games. Like that's how it goes.
That's another reason why I love coaching, honestly, is because it's kind of not controversial. Whereas a lot of topics or things that even with my job in education, how you teach or what you teach or all of that can get really heavy and really political really fast. And so coaching is so nice just to be able to throw yourself fully into and be like, this is best. Now there's still controversy or discussions there, but it's not as like trigger happy.
Right. And it's not as ingrained in every aspect, it seems like.
Yeah.
Cool.
The thing that I was need to finish going through was the kind of second tier of becoming a good coach. So program building.
Yeah.
Program building.
Thank you for remembering for me as if I had forgotten. All right. I knew we're okay. Anyways. Thanks.
Okay. So my starting points for being a good coach are being competitive and connecting with players. So I really enjoy the process of figuring out like the chemistry of a team and where they fit.
That to me is the most interesting thing a coach does.
And the most fun sport for that is actually soccer. Soccer is really fascinating and I realized, and I coached soccer before I ever coached basketball. And even though I didn't love soccer or understand soccer in the same way that I understood basketball or loved basketball, I do appreciate soccer.
Yeah. Well,
again, but even though I didn't have the same level of comprehension, one of the things that I noticed about myself when I was coaching soccer those first couple of years was I am very confident that the positions I am putting these players in are what's best for them in terms of the team performance. And so despite maybe having shortcomings in other areas, I have a natural ability to figure out where they best help the team. And so that's something I learned from coaching soccer. And it's having 11 people and their positions are way more different and varied than basketball is a more challenging than basketball.
Sure. And it seems like it's more, at least with soccer, as compared to football, it's not just determined by like your physical height and weight, right? Like a defender and a striker are similar-ish sized, right? They could, whereas like an offensive lineman and a cornerback, you're not swapping those guys out. There's no
football is as specialized as it gets, basically.
Right. Where soccer is a lot more like tendency, personality based, skill based,
creative, how creative you are.
Right. It's a lot of like what you bring to the table, not just how you're made.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, soccer, that's one of the pros that soccer has that basketball doesn't, is that height is less of a variable or less of a prerequisite in soccer. Whereas in basketball, if you don't have height, you're limited in a couple of different ways that matter.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you do it? All right. You say you do it naturally. I don't believe you. How do you do it?
Uh,
Because like this is applicable to anybody who works, or, like manages a team, or does anything at all, or like deals with like friends or what even. Like this is like a really interesting skill that coaches have.
it's there's I am a observer of human action.
Oh,
I think if we really were to psychoanalyze why I'm good at that particular skill, it would go back to being a very shy kid and never knowing like how to fit in and watching people very closely
sure.
and trying to understand what made them work and how I should act. But that somehow turned into, I think also, have you ever seen studies that reading fiction makes people have more empathy?
I think I've heard that. Yeah, that's
So
why
this is
I don't
another
read
theory.
fiction. I don't like it.
This is another theory I have, because some combination of those two things I think makes me very empathetic, and I can understand people, which is very frustrating and ironic at times because I'm a difficult person to understand. There's a large gap between those two things. But I think it's just that, like, understanding someone is the key, and that is not something that it's not something that I ever studied or intentionally acquired. I think people can get better at that, but I think if I were to say, what is my one gift that I am best at relative to other things or other people, it's definitely my ability to understand people. And I think that's kind of the framework for coaching. Have you read you've read Ender's Game, I'm sure?
No, I don't like fiction. Genuinely, I don't enjoy fiction. So
I was going to say Speaker for the Dead. I reread that a couple of years ago, and that's the second book in the Ender's Game trilogy. And it is Ender's Game is way more action and popular. But Speaker for the Dead is all about empathy and putting yourself in someone else's position. And I read that a couple of years ago, and I was like, blew my mind to how much of my worldview and how I view interacting with other people and where they come from was somehow very much aligned with what I read in Speaker for the Dead.
Okay.
I recommend you read it even if you dislike fiction. But
do I have to read Ender's Game first?
No.
Isn't Ender's Game about a 12-year-old that like does magic in space or something?
Yeah. You can watch the movie. You can watch the movie for Ender's Game.
Why on earth would you want to read that?
I think that you wouldn't hate it. Okay. But
I'll watch the movie for that one, and then Speaker for the Dead, I'll check. Is that one also about a 12-year-old, or is it like adult?
No, okay. So it's actually more. Should I say it's like Dune? Will that make you?
I haven't seen Dune or read Dune either. Have you seen those books? They're monstrous.
Yeah, I've read them all.
I'm a slow reader. I don't have time for that.
What was I going to say? Okay, so anyway, the point that I was trying to make is there's a quote in Ender's Game where he says something like, when you fully understand anyone,
mm-hmm.
it is impossible not to also love them.
Okay, right? And that's a fun little quote.
Well, it gets better because in Ender's Game, the actual end of the quote is something like, "And in that moment that I love them, I destroy them."
That's what's so you killed them, right?
Yeah. So it's talking about like kind of being in general and fighting this war where you have to anticipate, and he totally understands the opposition and he uses that to kill them. But he also, because he does understand them, he also feels this love for them. Anyway,
he sees the beauty in it and all that jazz. Yeah.
Right. So because I have this gift or ability to understand people, that is what makes me a good coach.
And you want to destroy them.
Yeah. Sometimes I think of it that way when I'm writing like evaluations or comments at the end of the semester. I'm like,
nice.
Right, I'm just gonna lay it all out here because I do understand this person, or I think I do. Okay. It also, by the way, gets me in trouble all the time because I've been right so so frequently in the past.
Keep going. How right
about
you are. Yeah.
about people's who they are.
Uh-huh.
I'm often put in the situation again when you're teaching. It's a little more justifiable. When it's like you and me, it's definitely something that you should be mad at me about. If I tell you that I understand you better than you understand yourself.
Sure.
But,
yeah, that's a mean thing. That's not a mean thing, but it is not a great thing to tell another person.
But when it comes to students, I think it's more reasonable because people don't know each other. People don't know themselves as well at younger ages, and there might be room for someone else on the outside to help them out in that way.
Yeah.
To answer your question, I don't know. I don't know. I don't understand it. It just kind of happened.
Sure. All right. Well, okay, because this is the interesting part of coaching for me. Let's approach it from a different angle instead of just I'm right all the time and I feel it.
No.
Are you?
I know that I'm not. I know that I'm not right all the time.
Okay. How about when you do put a team together? What are you looking to accomplish? What is that? There is like the cohesive team, but the cohesive team may not be the best team, right? Like they all get along really well and they pass, but they can't. What does that process look like to you in building a team? So say you understand the people and you understand your pieces. What are you building for? I mean, you're optimizing for
that's simple.
Points, I guess.
No. Okay, listen. When you have coached everything from middle school B volleyball to middle school cross country to high school sand volleyball. I've coached middle school tackle football. I've coached middle school soccer. I've coached high school soccer. I've coached indoor volleyball, and I've coached track and field. Not just sprints, but throws and jumps. So I've coached all of these things. You can't have a goal like that. Like you just have to come into every season saying our goal is excellence for whatever that means with this group of people in this sport. And excellence is, I think the best definition is the John Wooden definition, but it's the basic idea that we come as close to our potential as we can. And that's what success is in the terms of this season. So it's not necessarily like winning a certain amount of games or scoring a certain amount of points. It's just excellence. And so that looks different for different teams. But the thing that, and again, I've had this conversation with my teams every year or frequently throughout the year, but I think the best example of it is, last year my team made it to the state championship and lost. This year my team made it to the state championship and won. And so I asked them at practice, like, which team was better? This was actually before we won the game. I was like, which team was better last year or this year? And they're all yelling things, and I was just like, that's a trick question.
Yeah.
Because that's not what matters, right?
Sure.
We're worried about, we're concerned with coming as close as possible to our potential. And that's not just every season, but every game and theoretically every possession and every play of that possession. So that's the ideal. That's the goal.
Okay. That's nice and lofty.
Yeah.
Right. It's high-minded of you to have that whole excellence thing. How do you?
Oh, and by the way, part of that speech about that being a trick question, I had to chide them. I had to chastise them a little bit for saying that this year's team was better than last year's team, because we had to have a quick lesson in how you have to have respect for the people who built the program.
Sure.
And the idea that, like, if you know basketball, it's difficult. It's almost unheard of for a new team to come out of nowhere and win a championship. They have to experience failure and they have to grow through and eventually overcome. You at the very least, you're probably familiar with Michael Jordan having to run into the Pistons over and over again before he eventually surpassed them, and then the Pistons walked off the court, blah blah. But
right.
So if it doesn't help anything for our team that won the state championship to go and laugh at the team from 7 years ago. That was our first team. Be like, we are so much better than you guys. It's like, what does that accomplish? You know,
Right.
They did their best. You did their best. They helped start and build the program.
Right.
So if anything, you should be grateful to them and not.
Right. They were the pioneers, right? Like
Which comes back.
Their skills were like being the first one and having the bravery to do it.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And that goes back to like why education or coaching is like a fundamental building block of civilization or society, is that like you have to build on things that were before, and you have to maintain what you've learned and pass it down to the next group. So if you think about every team like a generation, it's like, yeah, this is the 7th generation and we accomplished more than any generation before us, but we can't think that that makes us special or
right. It's you've built it upon tradition and upon
it
didn't just come out of nowhere,
right?
Which I think that is kind of the fun thing about specifically high school, but I guess college has it a little bit, and like maybe the Patriots have it in the NFL, and that's about it. Like, is that it is about kind of building up that society, that culture. I mean, honestly, it's like culture in the sense of like history. It's not just culture in like the attitudes you have. Like it's about having that tradition, that history, that those forefathers or foremothers in this case, to like look for inspiration to. Like there's all that.
Yeah. And
it's a microcosm for society, really.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I see it.
So does that make you benevolent dictator of it all? The philosopher king of the program?
That may be applicable. I think that's I see that as one of my weaknesses as a coach. You know, you're better in some areas and worse in certain areas, and that's one that I'm working on, like delegating.
Okay.
Being a little less wanting to have control over every aspect and trusting people to step up and fill different roles. So yeah, if I said my strength is connection and competition, then one of my weaknesses is the delegation aspect, getting my assistants more involved, having them feel like they're contributing and actually contribute value and buy in. And then the other weakness, I think so far has actually been in-game systems and strategies.
Oh, that's interesting. Why would you call that a weakness? Because I would imagine you'd be good at that.
Yeah, I know. I definitely see it as trailing many of my other skills as a coach. So the medium skill, the one in years like 3 through 5, is skill building and player development, right? So first couple years, buy-in, program, get the ball rolling. Middle years is skill building, teaching them the actual skills that they need, whether it's like, this is how you shoot a basketball. This is how you make a left-handed layup. This is how you make a left-handed layup with a Euro step. This is,
right.
That was the middle portion of the program. And that's kind of, skill development is a really difficult topic in itself. And it's something that has kind of been taken over in our society by flashy, weird people who specialize in like, okay, so you're actually going to be juggling these things while you hold one eye shut and hop on one leg, and that's going to make you better at basketball and or whatever sport it is. And people like those things because like, oh wow, that's weird, that's out there, that must be good. Right. In reality, it might just be better to actually practice basketball. But that's something, and that, by the way, is why I fired myself as our volleyball coach, is because I knew I had hit a ceiling in terms of how far I could take our program. I was a good JV level coach. I could program build, culture build, I could teach the skills. And then we hit a ceiling where I was like, okay, the team still has room to grow. And I have nothing more to offer. Right. So we brought in a actual, varsity level volleyball coach who's done a really good job. And so I had that same thing in basketball where, so I am better at skills and development and being kind of a JV developmental coach than I was the varsity systems and strategies, in-game adjustments. So that's the last 2 years is what I've been focusing on, is the in-game adjustment thing. Not just having a plan coming in and not just knowing, you know, a couple basic adjustments that can be made, but actually assessing it in-game and being ready to make decisions. And losing that championship game is really what took me to the next level, because when I watched that championship game, the only conclusion that I could draw is that I wasn't good enough. It wasn't the team. Like, we had the skills, we had the players, we had, you know, all these things. The two things that we didn't have were, we didn't have experience in championship games. So that's nerves and that's mindset. And that's something that you can't really simulate. You can't, no matter how much you talk about mental toughness or whatever it is. The other team, it was their third straight championship game. Ours was our first. So that's a huge disadvantage. But other than that, I thought that I did not do a good job of adjusting in the game, and not just adjusting in the game, but having things to adjust to, right? So even if I had the thought, oh, well, I need to stop doing this and do this, we hadn't necessarily practiced that thing that we needed, or we weren't prepared for that thing and so that was my focus for this year. And, you know, in the off season was in-game systems and strategies, which again, I think is a relative area of weakness. And I got a lot better at it this year.
How'd you get better at it?
It just intentional practice. I mean,
what does that look like? Like, is that watching NBA and pretending you're the coach?
That is one. So when I'm watching basketball, it's kind of like football. You know, if you watch football just mindlessly, you just follow the ball and you don't see like, okay, that guard's pulling, or that person's blitzing, or that person picked up the blitz, or and even the way we watch football is the way that fans consume football is not how coaches watch it. Like in all 22 or something.
Are you saying they don't watch red zone coaches? They're not just watching touchdowns and getting that hit of
I have
NFL.
One of the things that I'd like to do is, so not necessarily me being a pro coach, but I want to like at least be close with people who are on pro coaching staffs, and close enough to actually have access to the team statistics. Like, what do they care about? What do they track? Because it is so much different than like what, you know, the broadcast throws up, or what fantasy football people.
They don't care about like completion percentage. Or like
and stats are so altered by scenario. Like, if you want to say, oh, this person's averaging this many passing yards per game, you're like, okay, well, half of those are when they're behind 4 touchdowns. So what does that actually tell us, right? So I'm so fascinated by how coaching staffs like pick and choose what their filters are or whatever. But anyway, so you said that you would expect me to be really good at systems and strategies.
Yes.
And I think that the main reason why I'm not is because I haven't had to be. Right? It hasn't been my focus. And my team wasn't ready for those sorts of things, even if I had it all for them, right? They couldn't execute those things or keep it in their head or whatever. So I haven't had to. And so now that the team is built up to a point where they can understand more advanced things, like sometimes we play a ball screen this way, sometimes we play a ball screen this way, or sometimes, you know, when this player has the ball, we're going to adjust defensive this way, rather than just saying this is always how we do it, you know. Or, you know, we experimented with the thing in man-to-man this year where I gave a player freedom to just trap the ball whenever they felt like it, right? And
what does that mean? So, I don't know what trapping the ball means.
So double team. So if you're playing straight up man-to-man and you're playing, you know, lockdown defense and guard your yard and all that stuff, it means that everyone has an assignment, more or less, and if the offense is doing their job is basically to draw a second defender to them and then create rotations and closeouts. But what I did, or what we, you know, just one example of something that we hadn't really discussed in the past, because I hadn't been thinking that way, and the team hadn't necessarily been ready as a group to go that far is giving someone the freedom to say, like, you understand man-to-man defense so well, and you're such a disruptor in passing lanes, especially on the ball, that I'm going to give you the freedom to leave your person, leave your assignment anytime you want, and go double team the ball for a trap. And the gamble, is that, one, you have to trust that player, right? That's an example of like a more hands-off approach instead of a micromanaged approaching where there's a bunch of rules and stuff. And basically you have to trust the player to be able to evaluate when it is the cost, benefit analysis, risk reward analysis of, okay, if I leave my player to go to the ball, there's a chance that they just pass it immediately, quick passes and get a layup. There's also a chance I deflect it or steal it or whatever, cause a turnover.
Right. So, okay.
And I mean, we did, if you want.
So you're just experimenting with like different strategies and practices? Like what?
Yeah. And things, mixing it up more often. So here's another weakness I would say of mine as a coach. Well, number one, okay, so I'll come back to that. A weakness of mine is that I'm too stubborn, in that I don't change things up quick enough. So when we're trying to execute something on offense, for example, and it's not working, my mentality is to be like, all right, I number one, I see the adjustment that they should make in order for this to work. And number two, I want to see it go right at least once before I give up and go to the next thing. So we run a different play or start a different set or make a sub. So I really want, one, the players to be able to see the same adjustments that I'm seeing from the sideline and to make them themselves without me having to call a timeout or without me, screaming at them from the sidelines. And two, I really hate giving up on something and just immediately moving on to the next thing. But what that means is we often go through, or in the past, we had often gone through stretches of just like stagnant offense, turnovers, kind of hesitation, uncertainty. And what we needed to do is just say, like, okay, scrap that. That's not a good fit for whatever reason. We can go back and figure out why later, but let's try a new thing right away. And so that kind of self-awareness has helped me give up on things quicker. And I'm bad at giving up on things, basically.
That's interesting. It's a lot of it's like adaptability, because I would imagine, I don't know, in my head, I think like you're the coach. You tinker it all together so it has the right chemistry to run and execute this system perfectly. And it's obviously all calculated and perfect in your head. And you're saying it's more, well, I got the good scenario, I put the people together I want to put together, and put the system out there. And then if it doesn't work, I'm just going to change it up real quick.
Right. And yeah, that is the hard part, is because you think, or the temptation is to be like, I see what's going wrong, and that's what makes me a good coach. Like, I see that this player should have back cut, or I see that this player was too focused on running the play and not open to other kind of ad-libbing, right? But seeing that you don't get, there's no reward, like as the coach, for knowing what's going wrong, right?
That's true.
Ultimately, if it's not working, then there is like a point where you have to say, okay, on to the next attempt. And sometimes you'll find that, let's say you're facing a 1-3-1 trapping zone. They only trap in the corners. And you have a play or action that your players know, okay, this is what we do when we see this defense, and they're not doing it. Sometimes if you go to something else and that also doesn't work, and then you go back to the first thing works, right? So
why? Have you figured out why that is the case?
No, but the point is, like, sometimes switching from something that's not working and trying something else and then coming back to the first thing is way better than just sticking with the first thing the whole time, if that makes sense.
I mean, it makes sense that could happen. I don't understand why that would happen, but that's not necessarily the point of a coach.
That's why coaching is fun. You don't necessarily have to understand why. You just have to figure out what's best.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So in terms of more advanced stuff, I think our team was definitely the most advanced this year that they've been, and it's still, some of it's just simplifying. But I got better from spending more time thinking about it, from specifically kind of replaying the championship game and saying, like, this is what I needed to do in this situation. This is what I should do in the next time I see this. And the other thing that I really learned from losing that championship game is that the other team was just, they just simplified the sport down to hustle and aggressiveness, basically. They were also skilled and they were really athletic and they had height, but they really outplayed us in hustle and they were way more aggressive than us. And meanwhile, I was kind of in that, I was like, I need to watch film. I need to do this. I need to, and it was all kind of like, I don't want to call myself soft, but it was all like focusing on like precision, fine point things. And it's like, that just got bulldozed.
Interesting.
By just a pure commitment to sprinting and to attacking.
Okay.
So it kind of was, it was a good lesson in, like, you can get too cute sometimes. I think you hear that, you know, if you can get a little too cute and be like, yeah, I'm drawing up plays, you know, because I'm watching film, I'm doing this. It's like, no, we just need to be tougher. It's
right. That's a good point. Is that, like, you know, they call them fundamentals for a reason, right? And that ability to just be in good shape and to, like, run and to do all that stuff can overpower this awesome play you made. That's, I'm sure, going to work every time, except when they're, you know, charging hard and going nuts on you.
Yep. Yeah. So that was good too.
Yeah.
So those are the, I don't know if that fully answers how I got better, but just a lot of intentional focus and thought and reflection.
Sure.
You know, some of it is watching basketball. I try to go to other high school girls games in the area. I try to, like, last year, there's several different leagues in Texas, and the UIL is the biggest one, and UIL is essentially probably the most competitive high school sports league in the world.
Okay.
I know it's the largest, and so I went down to, like, San Antonio and just watched all of the state championship games from the girls and took notes on, you know, things that they had in common that got them there, you know. And
what'd you learn?
I keep coming back to toughness, and, you know, there's chemistry and all that, and it takes skill and good players and good coaching, but you know, the willingness to dive on the floor, the willingness to sprint back on defense when it looks like they're going to get a layup, or, you know, willingness to take a charge, that sort of thing is what I've concluded is the starting point. You got to have that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you coach that by just saying, like how do you coach toughness? Like, you just get them, like, well, we'll do some reps on how it is to be tough, and then hopefully you will be tough.
I actually buy when a player makes their varsity team, I buy them a book, and it's called Toughness.
Oh.
And it's written by Jay Billis, and who's a fairly well-known college basketball, went to Duke, played at Duke, commentator dude. They don't know who he is because, you know, we previously talked about this. They have no idea. Like, all the stories in these books, they're just like, how do you say this guy's name? Christian Leitner? What? Who is that? Sure. Grant Hill. Anyway, so they all have the book once they hit varsity team. So some of the girls who've been on it for several years have now gone through it multiple times, and the book is the best one. Like I said, I read a lot of these. I read a lot, and I read a lot of coaching books, basketball books, mentality books. Yeah. But that's the best summary of just simplifying what it takes to be tough, especially pertaining to basketball. And he does a good job of including other sports in there, but he's writing it from a very basketball perspective. And so what we do is I ask them to read it over the course of the season. And basketball season has 3 weeks of break in it, where you have Thanksgiving break and Christmas break. So I don't feel too bad about giving them extra homework. But ultimately, then what we started doing this year is I would assign them a pair of them. The way it worked out, because I think there was 9 or 10 chapters. So I would assign a pair of them to basically summarize the chapter and give a presentation to the team. And I would pick the chapters based on what I thought I wanted those particular players to focus on or think about. And then I would pick when we talked about it, whether it was like commitment or courage or preparation. I would pick when we talked about it, when I thought, we were at a point in the season where that was a good thing to focus on. So that's how I try to teach toughness. In addition to things like, actually practicing diving on the floor, doing charge drills, really valuing those things. I personally think that the single best play you can make is taking a charge. It's more valuable than making a shot or getting a steal or whatever else.
Why is that more valuable?
So take, for example,
here's how I understand taking a charge. You're on defense.
Yeah.
The offensive player is dribbling towards the basket. You are in their way. They knock you over. They're not allowed to go through you to get to the basket.
Yeah.
Therefore, they charge through you. Yes.
Why? Yeah, before I get into this, I think saying that I value charges that highly kind of puts me in the stereotypical type of coach who also would say something like, I'll let you dunk when it's worth 3 points, otherwise you're taking layups, or like you always have to pass with 2 hands, like old school.
Yeah.
That's not me. But charges specifically, I'll tell you. So take one of our last games of the season. We had the first or second possession of the game. The other team's star player got on a fast break. We had one girl back on defense. She got back to the basket and she took a charge 20 seconds into the game. All right. So if you think about how that, even if it's later in the game, how fouls work.
Right.
Okay, so one, it stops a basket. Okay. Basket doesn't count. You get possession back. So anytime you can prevent a shot from occurring, that's a good defensive possession. 2, it establishes very quickly to the other team that you are tough and you're not going to get out of the way when they charge at you recklessly. In basketball, if someone's driving at you and they're about to run into you, your instinct as a human is to be like, I'm going to, at the last second, like try to get out of the way, or I'm going to flinch, or I'm going to whatever. And when that happens, the foul is always going to be on you. Okay. So it's kind of like playing chicken, where you prove, tie goes to the person who's on offense. So if you prove I'm not going to swerve away and we're just going to run into each other, then that's something that sends a message to the entire other team. Hey, we're tough, and you can't bully us or like mentally intimidate us by just running at us recklessly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you see that. Have you ever played flag football?
Yeah, been a while, but yeah. So
just a quick side off, like you would play flag football against guys who were just massive, and they wouldn't even try to evade getting their flagpole. They would just run at the defender as hard as they could, basically saying like, this person's going to have to get out of my way because I'm going to truck them.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, so 1, it sends that message. And then 3, it gets a foul on the opposing player. And you have you have a finite amount of fouls you can get in a game. If you get your first foul, that's 20% of the way of being disqualified.
Sure.
Okay. So if you get a foul on the other team's best player, that's huge, right? That person's going to be around the ball a lot. They're going to be, getting other fouls, and so that makes a huge difference. Like typically, like a standard coaching analysis is like, okay, if you get your second foul in the first quarter, you can't play the rest of the quarter. If you get your third foul in the first half, you're not going to play the rest of the first half, right? So immediately ups the stakes. Now, and if you're someone who draws a charge, if you're someone that that's the best way to say this. If you're the type of player that you can that we can draw a charge on, it probably means you're really good, right? It means that you're driving. It means that you're being aggressive, right? So you typically draw charges on other teams' good players. Okay, are you done? You think I've got multiple layers left to tell you why I value this? Okay,
keep going.
So, it has to, by definition, decrease the level of aggressiveness that the other team has because they know when we drive. Right now, if you're
playing scared now because now they know.
Well, yeah, they're not necessarily scared, but they know that they will be punished or they will be held accountable if they just recklessly drive to the rim.
Right.
Okay? And that changes the mentality the rest of the game. And then the last one is the bonus. So you don't shoot free throws on offensive fouls. So, but as fouls occur in the first half or the second half, you work towards getting to the bonus, right?
Sure.
So when your team reaches 7 total fouls in the half, then you shoot free throws after every common foul or personal foul.
Right.
So that one charge counts towards that total of 7, which means all of a sudden, maybe, instead of with 2 minutes to go in the half, you're shooting free throws, maybe it's 4 minutes, or maybe, a random kind of block or a hack that otherwise would have been cited out of bounds now puts you at the free throw line.
Right.
And free throw line
it enhances your offense in a way.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's my full breakdown. Hopefully I'm not giving anything away, but yeah, charges are valuable.
Nice. Okay, that's good to know. I never knew that. That's fun. That's an interesting level of analysis you go to as well. On that one thing you had 5 reasons? 6 reasons? Yeah. So I think that shows how much thought you've put into the game.
Yeah. So
now that you're at the state championship level, is now the next transition into like maintaining it? Like anybody, quote unquote, anyone can win one championship, right? Like now it's time, like okay, now it's
funny story
time, or
funny story here. I've lost quite a few championship games.
Oh, really?
In various sports, right? So I've lost a state championship in sand volleyball. I've lost 2 state championships in basketball. One was in a different league, and then the other one was the previous year. I lost in a league championship in middle school boys soccer. I've lost a state championship in volleyball. Not sand, indoor. Okay. So those are actually both the same year, even though they're different schools. Spring season, lost in the state final. Fall season, lost in indoor, lost in the state final. So I actually, because of how the media works and how they treat coaches, do you remember Marty Schottenheimer? I feel like you're the kind of person who knows who Marty Schottenheimer is, because you think that 3 years ago was like, you're like 3 years ago.
He coached for the Rams, right? Yeah, he was the offensive
Chargers. I
knew it was an LA team.
Right.
He was Marty Schottenheimer was with Phillip Rivers. They had a powerful offense that got like a gajillion yards, if I recall. I believe he was a West Coast offense guy, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, there you go. And that was like 2-3 years ago, right?
Yeah, that was like 2014. But it did occur during my time warp where I'm not sure what happened.
Yeah, it's your time warp. Yeah, I think it's actually probably
2015. I'm not sure what happened that year. I can't.
I think if you type this in, you'd find it's more like 2007.
No way. Marty Schottenheimer is no way. All right, I'm looking it up.
Yeah, get your research guy on that. But okay, here's the point. He's a good recent example, because the way coaches are treated in media is
2006. Unbelievable.
He died recently. Type in his Washington Post headline for when he died.
Let's see. News. WAPO. one of the NFL's winningest coaches dies at 77.
Oh wow, they must have got canceled because their first headline they had for his like obituary was Marty Schottenheimer, known for choking in the playoffs, is dead.
Oh, here's an article about that article. Yeah, let's see. Known for choking in the playoffs is dead. Yeah,
that's more or less what it said.
Team whose teams wilted in the postseason dies at 77. Oh, they gave him some colorful language.
Oh my gosh! Like, okay, so that's how coaches are treated in the media, right? And that's such a mean, like, so the man was coaching in the NFL at a very high level, right?
Yeah.
Was making the playoffs, never won a Super Bowl, and that is how they summarize his entire just like elite. Like he's second tier, right? You have your first year coaches, he's right there.
Yeah.
And so because I know how media and even fans, when you get to high levels, like critique coaches, if you got to win the big game, or you're not good enough, right?
Yeah.
So I actually did a very good job of creating that narrative in my own head about myself as motivation.
Sure.
Because I was saying, like, hey, if this was more in the spotlight, if this was college or pro, or there was a big fan base, then this is something that people would be talking about. They'd be saying, like, oh, he has 5 losses in state championships across multiple sports or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And so I used that as motivation to, like, break through and finally get this one. So this win was huge for me in terms of answering my critics, which are
your obituary now says state championship coach.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it matters. I was actually it was at the level of kind of obsessiveness where I told my captains they were like trying to plan a birthday party that weekend, and I was like, guys, I don't want you planning a birthday party. Focus on the game. You can plan a birthday party anytime else. I just don't want. If we lose, I don't want to always wonder what it could have been if you weren't planning a birthday party all weekend. Anyway, a little too far, but hey, we won. So, what was you said what's next? Okay, so
it's dynasty building, right? It's solidifying the program, or
I'll say this. One, yes, dynasty building. Our varsity girls won the state championship. Our JV girls, which we're a school with 180 kids in the high school. Most schools our size have maybe one varsity team, one team. They don't have a JV girls basketball team. They might not have girls basketball at all. So our JV girls entered a varsity tournament and won it at the end of the year. And our middle school girls basketball team won their league. So there is a pipeline.
Yeah.
That being said, last year's team had 6 seniors. This year's team had 7 seniors.
Okay. So
losing 13 players in 2 years is a very unique challenge. So yes, I mean, the goal is to win it again, and I think that's a realistic goal. And 2, it's not going to be easy. Definitely not the favorites, I'd put it that way. And I actually had a girl, one of the girls, sophomore, she scored like 21 in the championship game. She was like, I think you're gonna leave next year because all the seniors are leaving and we're not gonna be as good. Or she said something like that.
Right.
And I was like, I never know if I'm going to stay or leave until until the deadline at this school or at anything. Like, I kind of take it year by year. But you thinking that or suspecting that means that you don't understand how much I like challenges, because
that's
a team. If the team is worse, then that is even more fun.
I was about to say,
to like overcome adversity.
Clearly, she hasn't understood you, because I knew, like, I was a roommate. I know for a fact that the fact that you're now that everyone has counted you out.
Yeah,
you enjoy that. You revel.
Yeah, that's it. I love being the underdog.
Yeah. Nice.
So yeah, the dynasty. Yeah, if we could win another one, that'd be pretty fun.
Okay.
It won't be a failure of a season if we don't, because we're going for excellence. But sometimes excellence and championships go together.
Sure. That's interesting. Excellence and championships sometimes go together. Okay. I've got 2 sports questions for you, and then we can wrap it up. Does that sound good?
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Where is it? So this is a nuanced sports take, and that is that the best player on a team is not always the most important player on a team. Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
There was a book written recently about the importance of captains.
Sure.
And what this person did, I haven't read it. I've heard of 1 or 2.
You're referencing a book you haven't read? All right.
I've heard 1 or 2 podcasts on it. Okay. It's something that I would like to read, and it's something that I want to agree with.
Okay.
And thinking about it has changed how I approach my role or players' roles. But what this person did was made a definition of a dynasty. Okay.
Sure.
Said this is the definition of dynasty. And then they looked at every example of that across every sport that they had data on. So, there's cricket in there. There's, the Patriots in there. There's all these things in there.
Yeah.
And then they tried to analyze the variables, like what made this dynasty happen.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's lots of things that you might think, okay, it's Tom Brady, or okay, it's Bill Belichick, or okay, it's the culture, or it's whatever. But this author concluded the thing that had the most statistical significance correlation is the captains.
Oh, interesting.
If you can have your captains be the same, and if they can be good captains, that's the strongest correlation with a dynasty. And so, I would say that's my first instinct response to your question. And then the follow-up, or the thing that actually answers your question, is your captains do not have to be your best player, but it is most efficient or most effective when they are.
Okay.
And captains can be good captains in a lot of ways, but they don't even have to be regular, have playing time.
What do you look for in a captain? It seems like captain's more of a social position than anything else, right? It's leadership.
Yeah, so they have to be totally bought into the mission of the team. So totally unselfish. They have to be good at understanding their teammates, right? So essentially a captain is a coach, but on the player side. That's, again, how I think about it, right? They have to be on the same page as the coach. Like, you can't have your captain and your coach disagreeing. Even if they do believe different things, they need to show a united front. It can't be fractured. Mm-hmm. You need, I'm trying to remember, I wrote a blog called How to Be a Good Captain for Every Team in Every Situation. It's pretty short and concise, and it's on my website, nathanmcclallen.com.
Unbelievable. I'm going to edit this out. That's
Wait, that's not how these work? I thought that's how podcasts work. nathanmcclallen.com, and it's called How to Be a Good Captain for Every Team, and for any team in any situation.
I forgot what the website.
What's my name? It's my full name without a space.
Gotcha.
Capitals don't matter, but .com. So I said bought in, I said unselfish, not afraid of confrontation. What else? Those are the main things, I think.
What about respect, right? Like, they have to be respected by the team.
Yeah. So that's why it's easier for the best players to be the captains, because they have the natural respect from their excellence or their greatness. But there's lots of best players who should not be role models or have no desire to be. Yeah, leadership can take on many different forms. But I think it's true that your most important player is not always your best player, although it depends how you define best.
Sure. Okay. All right. So that's number one. Number two, the hot hand isn't real, and it's just, statistics.
The hot hand isn't real?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that hand?
So, like, say, let's just go basketball.
You're asserting the hot hand fallacy is true. That's what you're saying.
I'm asserting that it's not true. Like,
you're saying the hot hand was created by the people who made NBA Jam. We all just think, okay, made one, heating up, made two, heat check. If you make three, you are on fire.
Right. I think that's a fun little game mechanism for an antiquated old video game, but in real life, that guy just happened to make three in a row. He shoots whatever 20%. Well, I don't know what a good percentage is.
He's just as likely to miss the next one as he is to make the next one. There's no
right. The percentages don't change. It just so happened like he got he flipped heads 3 times in a row. That's not. He's got the hot hand flipping heads. He just happened to flip heads 3 times in a row. So I think you agree with me 100% on that, and we don't probably need to discuss it much, unless you have something to add.
I feel like when it comes to understanding, I have a unique perspective here because the big battle between advanced analytics and like the old school, so basically Moneyball, where you can just tell someone's a good player by looking at them, watching their swing baseball, versus saying we need these advanced metrics, is a really fascinating discussion. And I feel like I'm in the middle of it. I think I see both sides better than most people.
Sure.
That being said, I have also played basketball at a level where I've experienced being in the zone. It's happened twice in my life.
You remember that?
Oh, yes. It is like an out-of-body experience. I have been in the zone twice in a basketball game and played out of my mind, and like basically don't remember anything. I don't remember like watching myself play is like a totally different experience, right? And so that can happen in sports, and it's something that you can't understand unless you've experienced it. And so I think that both sides have points to make in terms of that debate. But it is definitely true that it is any person who's played basketball at a high level, and I'm not saying I've even played at that high of a level. I just know that I've been in the zone twice, and that comes with it. That only happens as a result of a certain number of practice and reps and that sort of thing. But you can get in a rhythm. You can be cold. You can be hot. Those things are true, and I will never stop believing that, no matter how many statistics you put in front of me. In fact, when the hot hand fallacy first was published or was being popularly cited, one of my literal goals in life was to be the person who disproved it, or found the stats to prove it wrong. And I think other people have kind of beat me to the punch, so it's less important for me now. But yeah, there's nuance there.
Okay.
I was going to, what was I gonna? Man, I can't remember what I was gonna say about that. But the hot hand fallacy is a good example of the broader battle, whether it's like in sports where let's say in football, you see people referring to a chart. I guess that was the most recent Packers game where they kicked the field goal when they were down 8.
The chart said to do it.
It's like he literally said the chart told me to, right? Yeah. That's an example of taking advanced analytics too far, because the problem, and I know you're only pretending to believe the hot hand fallacy because of our shared economic beliefs and the knowledge problem, Hayek, all that sort of thing. knowledge of a particular time and place is oftentimes way more valuable than scientific knowledge or data knowledge. And if you look at that in terms of like, should we go for it on 4th down? It can be true that every team, if you look at every team that's ever gone for it on this distance, or even with this score or with this much time left, there's a certain percentage of success and failure. But it is also simultaneously true that no team has actually been in this specific scenario before with these players against this team. Every situation. Right. So you can't just look at a chart and say, this is the best thing.
Right.
Speaking of which, I want to call a shot here real quick while we're being recorded.
Sure. Call your shot.
You know how, so going for it on 4th down.
You're taking a lot of, you're pushing your sights. You're calling shots right now. It's going to your head a little bit, but okay. All right, call your shot.
Okay. So you know how the trend in football play calling is more risk. Same thing in something like baseball, where it's like we're going to just go for a home run every time.
Right. They're going more
high risk, high variance. Right. Yeah. And same thing in football, where it's like we're going to go for it on 4th down more.
Yeah.
I want to predict on your podcast right now.
Great.
Lock it in.
Lock it in.
The next evolution in offensive football, in terms of risk reward, understanding it better, and playing in a way that you have more variance, high risk, higher payoff, is going to be lateraling the ball, similar to rugby.
Sure. Okay.
It's going to be worked into plays intentionally, practiced,
right.
Knowing like, okay, if this works.
They do that. It's the option play.
No. Like hook and ladders being
the RPO.
Hook and ladders being like a regular thing that you see, right? That's my call.
That's a bold claim.
Thank you.
Okay, because I would say maybe on 4th down.
Okay. Yeah, sure. You can.
I think the risk reward. I think the risk reward. There's a higher risk there because the risk is fumble, right? And you lose a possession as compared to.
But everyone says that, but that's because it's not practiced, right? If you practice it more,
sure. If you practice it more, and it's not like even if you screw up the lateral, you're going to lose the ball. So it's not the probability of fumble isn't 50-50. It's much smaller than 50-50.
Yeah, and if you can attempt the lateral before you're getting hit, right? So that's the variable. It's like if I know I can do this, but I'm getting crushed and I'm trying to do it. That's where you.
It just sounds like you're running option plays from a pass first. I don't.
No, I think offensive football is going to have more rugby style offense.
All right. Well,
what's the next evolution? Jotting it down.
Locked in. All right, it's officially locked in. I'm glad you made that prediction. Thanks. You. All right. Is there anything you want to plug that you haven't plugged already, Nathan? We're wrapping up. What's your website called? If I wanted to read like your writings on topics, where would I go for that?
It's just my name. myname.com, just like yours. You have a name.com website, don't you? We talked about this.
Yes, I have had mine for years, long before you had one. And mine's and mine looks better too. So there.
Oh yeah, I think both of those things are true.
Yeah, I win that one.
Yeah. Well, you write about charts. Is that what you write about?
I write about other things. Economics, marketing, Catholicism. It's great.
Mine's PE and economics, classical economics. Yeah,
that's great.
But I also write about everything.
Cool. I mean, what else is there besides PE and economics?
It's my wheelhouse.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Nathan, for giving me your time and talking to me. I'm doing the bow.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. It's a classic 2-hour discussion on coaching. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
All right. Adios.
Adios.